Hey, welcome to day 12. My name is Tammy. I'm your mentor and guide on this journey of 31 days of essential oils. And if you're just now joining me, if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm really happy to have you along and checking it out. If you've been with me this whole time, I really appreciate you being a part of this with me. This is quite the adventure, truthfully. I never saw things kind of unfolding the way they were. It was just an idea that I came up with. And as I've mentioned before, that this is really my perspective of essential oils. That said, the last few of them haven't been exactly the most upbeat and positive, like, hey, these are great, right? And that's because not everything that's natural is safe. And a lot of the oils are that way. I mean, they're beneficial. They all have amazing benefits. All plants do. But the fact is that some of them can be toxic, especially if you use too many of them, such as in star anise case or anise, um, and other ones too. It's not just that one. And so, really understanding how to gauge these oils is exceptionally important. So that said, in these videos, I have been sharing my personal experience with them, kind of giving a little bit of insight to that, and then I've been following up with a blog at this point, because of life, and I have kids, adult kids, or young adult kids that kind of pop in from time to time, it's been hard for me to keep up with all the blogging. So I do apologize about that. But you're welcome to check out synergessence.com, 31 days of essential oils tab. Um, Feel free to follow along, subscribe. You'll actually be get notifications as to when I do post again. But I'm about 2 days behind, truthfully, at this point, and I hope to keep it that way. The reason, part of it, besides the excuse of the family, is the fact that I do put a lot of thought and research into it because I don't ever want to say anything that cannot be backed up. I don't spew and I don't regurgitate. This is really comes from 30 years of experience, application, modification, study, research, and so forth. And because the body is constantly adapting to the external world, the oils are going to be reacting differently with everybody. Now, that said, today I'm going to be talking about lavender. What's important to know about the oils when we have a list of properties is when you look at the list of properties, it'll say, it's first of all, nobody's supposed to tell you that it will absolutely have a positive, do this for you. It may support these symptoms like anxiety or distress or, digestive distress or scars or rashes and so forth. It may support that. And the reason for that is there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, an essential oil consists of many constituents. It's not just a single constituent. So in the case of lavender, it's very calming and soothing. And I have this time and time again with many people. They'll come to me and they'll ask me, what do I recommend for them to go to sleep with? And before I go any further, I just want to say it's a kind of gray, rainy day here. So I'm using um, where I'm at doesn't have a lot of windows and there's not a lot of great light, so I'm having an artificial light, but it's making it look kind of grainy. So I'm hoping that that's not too disturbing. But okay, so back to what I was talking about. So, like I said, they have a number of constituents, and in the case of lavender, we recognize it for being calming and soothing, and many people have come to me, well, what do you recommend for sleep? Well, first and foremost, I need to understand more about that. Um, Sleep involves a number of chemicals, so it's a chemical reaction that triggers sleep. And I frequently, and if not at all, ever recommend lavender. I only recommend lavender for young people or young women who are having a low flow menstrual cycle and or potentially older women who are going through menopause or who have gone through menopause. And almost like star anise, um, but not to the same degree because star anise is once in a blue moon. If you haven't seen that one, go check it out. But it is, you just don't want to be using it on a regular basis. Now, the point to the number of constituents is the calming and soothing effect of lavender comes from primarily the constituent linalool. And linalool can be found in a number of oils. Okay, lavender is not the only one with linalool, and in fact, there's other oils that actually have a higher percentage of linalool. So just because it may support, anxiety and helping to calm the system down, that is a short-term effect, and it does work. I've used it in that degree, especially, um, like I said, when I would use it is in an emergency situation. Because I'm just really trying to think about probably the last 10 years, I may have used lavender with a client once or twice. That's how infrequently I recommend it. So yes, it does work on burns. I predominantly like to have used it with, when I was using it more frequently, it was in a kind of like a muscle rub. When I was doing when I would do some hands-on work on people, or I would make something for somebody, I would actually would do a blend of lavender, rosemary, and peppermint. Now, with that said, we have to keep in mind, number one, there's different types of lavender, and number two, there's different types of rosemary. So, and this was before, like I said, this was years ago, before I was really getting into the in-depth experience of the oils. So in this case, to use lavender, maybe with a child who has been, it's like I said, an emergency situation where they're like really, really cranked and frightened, possibly in the process of having a meltdown. I would really, really, when I use that phrase meltdown or that term, I'm not implying with autism. Autism and lavender do not go together at all. And I'll get to that in just a moment. And in fact, I'll explain more as to why I do not encourage the constant use or the regular use of lavender. But in this case, in an emergency situation, if you have a child who is particularly just really, really distressed and you're trying to get them to calm down, a little bit of lavender on a cotton ball would be plenty, just to kind of almost like not an Epsom salt, oh my God, smelling salt, but just have them sniff it, and you'll have, with all good intention, a calming effect. Now, like I mentioned in with holy basil, sometimes the oils have the opposite effect, and in the case of lavender, a long-term effect can be excitability, and depending on this is why autism it's not recommended for autism, because the disruption to the neurochemistry is so significant, and due to the instinct of the stress mechanism. Okay, so every one of us is wired to protect our body, where our genome is wired to protect us from the environment, or it's designed to keep us safe and protected and surviving. And depending on the way we are wired, some people have a higher level of excitability due to the alterations in the chemistry. This is not dysfunction. This is simply changes and adaptations within the system that have led to this. And so if you have a higher sensitivity level, such as with autism, it's going to potentially aggravate the system even further. Now, it might initially, but it won't last long. I mean, I've seen this with autism and with some of my clients, where we went from, well, I wasn't using them, with the ABA programs they were in, were using a lot of lavender-based like lotions and stuff, and so the kids would like maybe relax enough to maybe take their midday nap, and then they would wake up, and then they had crazy amounts of meltdowns. I mean, the activity level and the agitation level was so significant. And the only reason I learned of this was because one of the mothers was talking to me about this, and they were explaining to me they couldn't figure out what was going on. And I just started walking through what they were doing on a daily basis, and I found out about the lavender. So we took the lavender out of the school, and that dropped significantly. The amount of meltdowns dropped. So long-term effects in a more grounded system is how I would want to put it, one that's not quite as excitable. You're still exacerbating estrogen levels, and the long-term effect will be a higher, potentially other health issues, because estrogen is a signaling molecule, and it does activate both the autonomic nervous system as well as the immune system. So if it's not excitability and emotional agitation immediately, long-term effects could be potentially even worse. So this is the reason why lavender is not recommended for anybody who has an estrogen related cancer such as prostate and or breast. Now, the other day I did a video it's already been, you may or may not have already seen it, and it came out shortly after I started doing some of these videos, and I was feeling really bad because, number one, I was really nervous as a result of saying things about the oils and thinking, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? I don't want to come out as a naysayer. So that said, it's really just the point to all of this is understanding that there are alternatives, okay? And so subsequently, after these next couple of videos, the final 2 weeks of this 31 days is going to involve suggestions for alternatives. And even in the case of lavender, like I said, on a short-term basis, if there is a sunburn, absolutely, it's very calming to the sunburn, very, very calming. And it does help soothe the tissue as well as it doesn't prevent the bubbling, the blistering and so forth. It doesn't do that. You'd have to really soak in it on a regular basis. And trust me, there's actually better oils for that. So, as I mentioned, because they have different constituents, and what's going on with science is that science studies these individual constituents. This is where I come in, because my background is actually also includes, besides aromatherapy, it includes pharmacology. And if I haven't mentioned this, this is 30 years worth. So the pharmacology, I get heavily involved in the study of the plant constituents as it relates to human health and drug development. And so part of the studies that are going on a regular basis is the investigation into these individual plant constituents. And so while we can find positive benefits to these individual constituents, it's the ultimate synergy of all of the ingredients or the components of the oil that ultimately impact the system. And yet again, there's no way of predicting how, in this case, lavender is going to affect everyone. And the simple reason for that is because we all are wired differently. Yes, we have the same DNA, same DNA codes, but the way the receptors are activating and deactivating and kind of flowing through life changes depending on our lifestyle, our thought processes, how the inherited genetic system, because there's several layers to the genes. So this all contributes to how we ultimately react to oils, medications, and everything. And this is a big reason why it's such a big deal for me to have people understand how the oils really do work in the body and beginning to make maybe different decisions. I mean, I get that a lot of the books and the websites are, they provide a lot of good information, positive information about the oils, but the fact is that there are potential for conflicts with other things, including your own system. And so really learning how to kind of check in. So with regards to lavender, because one of the things that I'm not going to do during these 31 days is repeat variations. I think I said I might, but I just decided I'm not going to. So like in the case of marjoram Spanish, I'm not going to cover marjoram sweet. They're two very different oils. In the case of lavender, I'm just talking about lavender, but there's a multiple kinds of lavender, okay? True lavender itself is very estrogenic. The other versions of lavender have a tendency to have a higher constituent that can lead to neurotoxicity and potentially seizures. And there again, problematic for autism. Autism happens to be more prone to seizures. And so in order to protect ourselves, we don't want to use oils that are on a regular basis that are neurotoxic. So unfortunately, some of the things that include lavender as a part of the fragrance potentially could very well be some of the less costly lavenders. Not that it's adulterated or anything, they're just different plants, and the different plants provide different chemistry. True lavender is exceptionally expensive, not too far off from rose and jasmine. So you really, I mean, so to be getting these products at a fairly reasonable price, they're either adulterated lavenders, they're either just, or they are just the fragrance molecule, which there again doesn't have any therapeutic value to it. But I would just use caution, because part of the issue that we're facing with all of our products and is the fact that some of these constituents have been recognized, and this is, I write about this, have been recognized as having the ability to create permeability in the skin tissue, the lung tissue, and even the brain. And they're developing this into our body care, personal care, meaning including your supplements. It's going into clothing. I know the European Union has banned nanotechnology in the clothing, but I'm not quite so sure about the US. So knowing that if we're using oils on a regular basis, that they do contain, some of them actually do contain some of their chemistry, and it accentuates the absorption rate. So this is one of the things where people always go, what if, because I don't recommend, and I never have, and I never will, taking oils orally. It's just fine putting it under your nose. It's perfectly okay smelling it, and it's absolutely perfect putting it onto your skin. You can take baths with it as well. But the reason why it's so readily absorbed is because they do contain chemicals that increase the permeability of the skin. So it's absorbed right in, as well as they are lipophilic chemicals, which means they are readily taken into the bloodstream. So because they like oil, and so the oil in our skin draws it into the body, and so there's all this accentuation. And if we combine that with other products that also include nanotechnology to increase absorbability, we are increasing our rate of chemical overload, which will further stress the body. So I kind of got into a tangent there that doesn't really necessarily involve lavender. That said, the best ways that I know to use lavender, like I said, is if in an emergency situation, whether it be for sunburn, initial the first day of the burn, if you have a child who is exceptionally excitable at the moment and needing a little bit of calming down, do that. But I don't recommend it for sleep. I really don't. I mean, those would be the two primary reasons. As I said, I haven't used it with a client in over 10 years, or just it's only maybe once or twice within 10 years. So it's been a long time for this very reason. And again, I don't mean to be a naysayer, but I am trying to emphasize that we have these oils available to us. It's just really a good idea to, if we want to have them on hand, that's fine. The question might be, can we diffuse them? Well, diffusing lavender might not be such a bad thing, except, I wouldn't recommend it on a regular basis. If you really like the fragrance of lavender, pay attention to how you feel, would be my suggestion. Okay? And that's yeah, but because diffusing it in the air or in the room really does reduce the amount, because it's really diluting it even that much further. So you're not getting a lot of it. So it might be okay every once in a while if you really like the fragrance. Other than that, that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Check out the blog, which will be released in a couple of days, and hopefully I didn't say everything, and that I can actually get to more material there. All right, you guys take care, and thanks for being here.